All right. It's 7 o'clock, and we have a quorum of commissioners present. So I'm going to open the meeting of the Dartmouth Conservation Commission for Tuesday, March 11, 2025. This meeting has been duly posted in accordance with state laws and town bylaws. And we're conducting it this evening as a result of Governor Healy's signing on March 29, 2023, a further extension of the hybrid remote meeting options for municipalities. That legislation has a sunset on March 31st of this month. And just as an FYI, we're trying to keep abreast of what's happening. There's various bills to have a continuation of the remote option, but no longer as an emergency order. So we'll let you know what happens. The Great and General Court is coming down to the wire on that one. We do have, like I said, a quorum present. So we have 6 commissioners present. It'll take an affirmative vote of 4 for any motion to carry. Our first item of business is to approve the minutes of February 11, 2025. May I please have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
May I have
Second.
a second on that motion, please?
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. A roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. We don't need to approve the field trip reports of February 25 because there weren't any. So we can move on to receive the minutes of February 25, 2025. May I have a motion to that effect, please?
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. Hey, we do have a field trip report tonight. It's a request for a partial certificate of compliance with DEP file 15-2696, RCC 25-3. It's from David Pichette for the completion of the wetland replacement in a 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. It's on land described as map 113, lot 54-11. This is on Elm Street. And this evening, Mark will not be here. His wife had surgery earlier today, but we're very fortunate to have Eduardo filling in. So Eduardo, what is staff's recommendation on this request?
So as you mentioned, the partials for wetland replacement within the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering wetland. We're recommending a partial certificate of compliance solely for the wetland replacement.
Okay. Does any commissioner have any questions? I don't see any. By the way, as you may or may not recall, with this particular matter, it was recommended that they wait until they finish everything and then come in for a full, but that was not the applicant's choice. So I'll entertain a motion to issue a partial certificate compliance solely related to the completion of the wetland replacement.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. We're moving now to our public hearings. And the first public hearing is a continued public hearing on DEP file 15-2777, NOI 25-6. It's on the notice of intent from Eddie Lopez for the demolition of an existing single-family dwelling and the construction of new single-family dwelling within bordering land subject to flooding, the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland and inland bank, and it's within 200 feet, of the riverfront area. The applicable regulations are 310 CMR 10.02, 10.54, 10.55, 10.58, as well as Article 2 of the Dartmouth bylaws. The land is described as map 150, lot 137. It's at 59 Victoria Street. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Nat.
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. Is there someone here this evening representing the applicant?
Hi, yes, this is Alphonse Coca with KBM Design Group, the civil engineer.
Okay, you've got the floor.
All right, good evening. Again, my name is Alphonse Coca with KBM Design Group, 102 State Road in Dartmouth. Can I share my screen?
You can share your screen, certainly. Well, we can try. We'll see if it happens or not, but yes, you can try it.
All right, share. Let me know if you guys can see it.
I can. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so we were in front of you of the board on February 25th for the proposed project out of 59 Victoria Street. The applicant is proposing to demo the existing building located right here. That's within the 25-foot buffer, which is shown in this pink color, and also the existing house is partially within the 100-foot flood zone right here, and it's within the 100-foot buffer zone of the wetlands, and then within the 200-foot riverfront area. The applicant's proposing to construct a new house outside the flood zone and the 25-foot buffer zone. As part of the remediation, we're proposing to plant 2 silver maple trees, and then 8 shrubs, 4 high bush blueberry, and then 4 sweet pepper bush shrubs. Also, we're proposing to plant the rear, this area in the back, with a pollinator grass seed. During the hearing last time, it was brought up about the 2 vehicles that were abandoned by the previous owner that were not shown in the survey. After that hearing, I went out to the site and then field located the 2 vehicles that are shown highlighted in yellow right here. This vehicle right here, the largest one, is an RV style vehicle, and this vehicle right here, it's an old bread truck from Sunbeam Bakery. You can still see the logo there. From the last hearing, the commission requested that the removal of the vehicles it needs to be taken care of by at least have in presence a professional environmental company. The applicant, Mr. Lopez, has reached out to Frank Corp and then has gotten a proposal, which we submitted with a supplemental narrative. And then prior to the removal of the vehicles, Frank Corp would be on site to ensure the vehicles are removed safely. And then if any spills happen during the removal, they will be equipped to handle the spill, and then so no further contamination happens to the site. I also personally went there, got underneath the vehicles to make sure to inspect the condition of the undercarriage, especially the gas tanks, and then any other contaminating any fluid compartments like a gas tank, or checking underneath the engine for oil spills. I did not observe any. The gas tanks were intact, and there was no sign of spill of visual spills of a chemical spill on site underneath the vehicles. On the supplemental report we submitted, can you guys see these images?
I do.
So this is the RV. So I went around, took some images and also some underneath. So this is the side of the RV. This area here is a generator that it's an area that can contain fluids. I mean, like fuels. Took a picture of this area. Is right here at the rear. The RV has a tank underneath and it has a water compartment right here that was empty. But this one is basically a fuel containing generator. So I took an image to show that I did not see any signs. This shows the overall undercarriage of the vehicle and then of the RV. And then this shows the gas tank of the RV. The gas tank is intact and there's no signs of rust, the exterior rust, but I'm saying rot or any cracks or any broken pieces to indicate leakage. The next images, this show the Sunbeam truck next to the house. I was able to climb over the debris right here and get to the side of it, to this side. So this is the side of the vehicle. Also, I got underneath Sunbeam. This is the drive shaft that's fallen, but underneath right here, there's no signs of any oil. This is the engine compartment under the engine of any oil leaks or any antifreeze leaks right here. And then this image, this shows the gas tank the best I could without, as far as we get underneath the gas tank. Again, exterior rust due to being an old truck, but no signs of rot, holes, or any signs of a leakage. So with that being said, we agree with the commission that during the removal of those vehicles, we're gonna hire the client who will retain the services of Frank Corp to make sure that they're removed safely. And then and hopefully not, but if anything happens, any leaks or any spills during the removal, Frank Corp will be equipped to handle those on the spot, so there's no further contamination to the site. Mr. Lopez is in the meeting too with us, and I'd like to, he wants to speak to you. So
Now's his time.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So, yeah, during the last meeting, there was also a mention of possible testing of the soil in and around the vehicles, but it wasn't necessarily specified the vehicles themselves or the testing was to occur underneath the vehicles or anything like that, just testing the property itself. In my opinion, I think that would be an unfair burden to put on me because there's no way of determining any historical issues that have occurred on that property. Though there is no driveway on that property, the cars were parked in a manner that was obviously acceptable for the use of the property. I unfortunately and fortunately am pretty well versed in 21Es. I've done several in my career, and they're required for most commercial purchases. The banks require them, especially in part because it's a better way to determine responsibility for any contamination. In this case, it's never been a requirement for a single family dwelling. So in the event of any sort of spill, whether it was a guy filling up his lawnmower or chainsaw or anything along those lines, there would be no way to determine the responsible party. I pride myself on trying to bring this property back to life and back on the tax roll, of course. And we've even gotten some complaints from neighbors that are expressed concerns about the condition of the property, which is understandable, and I'm doing my best to try to remedy that. I obviously did not put the vehicles there. I inherited those vehicles. I didn't make any attempt to remove them prior to. I'd like to make sure that the vehicles are removed and towed away in a safe manner, and that's why Frank Corp will be there to make sure that that's done, and that any spillage whatsoever will be taken care of on the spot. I just feel that it'd be setting a dangerous precedent to require me to test that site for any historical contamination, and also just an unfair burden on me. I don't know that it's something that I would even be able to do. I've had experience. I'll be coming before this commission with another property that I did extensive testings in excess of $40,000 worth of testing. Fortunately, it worked out very well, but these sort of tests can be extremely costly, and without having a responsible party, it would all fall on me, and which would again be unfair. I haven't done anything to the site. I've waited to come before the boards, all of them, to make sure that everything was done correctly and to code. The demo permit was pulled. Asbestos has been surveyed, and there is no asbestos on the site. I even went as far as to get quotes to demolish the building by hand, with taking great care that heavy equipment isn't going into any buffer areas, and there's an abutter that's pretty close, and I wanted to make sure that it was safe, so that building's actually going to be taken down by hand. And I did get a note from the Board of Health with concerns regarding, whatever could be in the property. So I took that into account, and that also weighed into my decision to have that demoed by hand, which is going to be more expensive. But I think it's the right thing to do, given the location of the house and its proximity to the resource area. So what I'm asking the commission to do is to take into consideration my concerns, and hopefully not impose an unfair burden on me, and have me, or have it as a condition that I test the whole property for any contaminants. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I just want to, before I ask Eduardo on behalf of staff to give their comments, I just want to make one slight correction to the narrative. And by the way, I do appreciate that you're attempting to bring this, as anyone who's gone by will attest, fairly dilapidated property into a vibrant, usable living area for the town and for your neighbors and for whoever's there. So I appreciate that. But, as you probably know, having been involved with 21E, the property owner is the person who bears the burden. And the property owner usually goes and tries to find the responsible party who put the stuff there. But ultimately, we can stop at the property owner. The state can stop at the property owner. They also have the right to go down the chain of title, but don't have to. So anyone who was an owner of the property has a problem in terms of the remediation. And if there is someone who can be determined as responsible, they have a problem as well. But it's not an incumbent upon any municipality, any board of a municipality, or even the Commonwealth to go find a responsible party. That's really the responsibility of the property owner if it wasn't them. And I do appreciate the fact that you didn't create this problem. So believe me, I'm not equating the issue that we're discussing with something that you did. You didn't do it. You unfortunately, and I think you used the right term, you inherited this. And that's a problem. I understand that nobody wants that kind of an inheritance. But I will be very interested to hear the staff's comments. And frankly, I did listen to what your representative said. He did a visual, which is very helpful, but that wasn't what Mark had asked when we were last here. So I'll listen now to Eduardo. You have the floor. Eduardo, I can't hear you. I think you're mute. There
Yep.
you go.
So as Mike was saying before, we believe that the construction of 59, the reconstruction of a new building, would be a great of great value to both the town and the neighbors, given how derelict the current building is. And as Mike was saying, or as Mark likes to say, the problems of the land goes with the owner. So if something had happened to that land, it is the current owner's responsibility to take care of it. Given that, we mentioned last week there were some concerns with the potential discharge of hazardous materials into the surface or groundwater within or adjacent to the site. We believe that your observations are not comprehensive enough to accept that there have been no historical releases of these vehicles. And it's the Conservation Commission's responsibility to protect the surface and groundwater quality in jurisdictional wetland resource areas. Given that, given everything we've heard today, staff will recommend approval to include our standard conditions with 2 additional conditions in accordance with the site plan dated March 5th, 2025. The 2 conditions are as follows. In accordance with the MEDEP comment from their file review, all proposed activities shall conform to the applicable performance standards for the riverfront area set forth at 310 CMR 10.58. And the second condition, prior to any demolition or construction activities commencing, the site will need to be certified to be free and clean of any hazardous or special waste, oils, grease, or contaminants discharging or potentially discharging into the surface or groundwaters on or adjacent to the site or any jurisdictional wetland resource area or buffer zones by a qualified environmental specialist.
All right, so I'm going to consider now any commissioners with questions, either to the applicant's professional engineer, or to staff. Eduardo? Does anyone have any on the commission?
Just one question from me, Mr. Chairman. Does anyone have a ballpark sense of what the cost roughly would be for a 21E assessment for this specific site?
It depends on what they're going to be doing out there. Clearly, when you have a 21E, it depends on a lot of factors, but they usually will do test borings, representative. They obviously aren't going to dig the entire site up. And then those test borings are usually submitted to the lab for analysis. It's probably going to cost 15 to, it could be, depending on what they find, it could be 15 to even 30 or $40,000. But I'd say the light side would be 15 and the high side would probably be 30 or $40,000 based on what I've seen with other sites.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other commissioner have any questions? I will just make a statement, then I'm going to open it up to the audience, anyone in the audience that wants to be heard. I appreciate the trouble that Mr. Lopez inherited here, and it was not of his making, so I most certainly do appreciate that. But I am concerned, and I understand as well, he made a statement that said, essentially, hey, listen, 21E testing is usually appropriate in commercial settings, but not residential. And I agree, that's usually correct, but not all residential settings are, in a buffer zone, in a land subject to flooding, in a riverfront area, and have derelict vehicles on them in a state of disrepair. So there's extenuating circumstances here that aren't normally seen in a residential building lot. If you can go and look at some of the other lots that are being developed, whether it's out on Bakerville Road or off of Tucker Road, they don't have these issues to deal with. So I understand that's not normal, but this is not a normal site either. Okay, so we have to address the concerns of the site and how it applies to our jurisdiction and our touchstones, which are the Code of Mass Regulations and the town's bylaws. So anyway, having said that, I just want to be now making sure that anyone in the audience that wants to be heard can be heard.
Mr. Chairman, this is Rich Rione.
Yes.
I'm not involved with this project at all, but a compromise might be to have a professional sample any staining. In my opinion, if there had been historic gasoline dripping on the site, it's long gone. If oil dripped, it would chelate to the soil and it would show as a stain. And you can sample that total petroleum hydrocarbon. It's called the TPH. Costs about $45 to have a laboratory do the analysis. So the commission might, rather than require full 21E, have a licensed site professional do that surface sampling and determine whether there are exceedances of total petroleum hydrocarbon. And that could be accomplished with much less than $15,000. I think $1,000 would probably be the upper limit, particularly if there's limited amount of staining, which I think is probably the case.
Thank you, Rich. That's a very helpful bit of information. Is there anyone else in the audience that wants to be heard on this application? I don't see anybody, but I might be missing someone. So if there is someone, please just chime in.
So if I may, if no one has any other comments before you guys render a decision, I would like to just kind of put a couple questions out there, food for thought, again, before you render your decision. My concern again would be, setting a precedent where I attempted to do everything correct here with not touching the property. But hypothetically, had I removed the vehicles, which was well within my right to have done, I don't feel like that would have been necessarily beneficial to this dialogue. I think it's important that we do have this discussion, and but I can give you an example of last meeting we had. I noticed a property that just so happened to be on the same street, and that particular property had an issue with contaminated materials in a dumpster that had sat out there for months because they had conducted work without permits. They did it the wrong way, and when they came before the commission to get an NOI for a tie-in to the sewer, there was no mention of that because the dumpster was long gone. So my concern is an issue like that, where someone does it wrong on the street, they have no issues. Someone does it right on the street, they do. My other question would be, if we are attempting to set this precedent, where do we draw the line? How long do those vehicles have to be on the property? Are we going to do Google Maps on every single family property to see if there were derelict vehicles that were there prior to their application for NOI? I want to be informed because, again, I will be before this commission, hopefully, God willing, many more times for, improving properties in town and doing it the right way. But I also want to be playing on a level playing field, if that makes sense, where I know what the rules are and everybody's applied to the same rules and everybody's playing by the same rules. So I just wanted to put that my little out there.
I understand where you're coming from, because sometimes when you play by the rules and the other guy doesn't and he seems to get away with it, you feel like, why did I apply by the rules? Why didn't I just do what he did and take my chances? The problem is when you get caught not complying with the rules, you get squashed. Okay. There's no chance in the world, given the sophistication now that we have to determine things, that getting away with it is going to end up being, in the long run, in the best interest. We have plenty of enforcement orders out there, Mr. Lopez, and there's a reason. Those are people who didn't play by the rules. They didn't think they'd get caught, or they just hoped that it wouldn't be noticed or it'd be de minimis. Now, if there was a dumpster full of hazardous materials, nobody complained to Board of Health, nobody complained to us or anyone else, and it was gone at the time the application went in and the conservation agents went out for the NOI. I mean, we probably didn't know it was there and nobody had complained. So that person probably got away with it. And I don't say that's right, but at some point, you just mentioned it. So at some point, if there's contamination, there's a big problem.
So,
I
Mr.
don't believe you can just say, well, let's just not have the rules and we'll just see what happens, because we all live in a community. And if you were living in a house and the guy next door didn't comply by the rules and it harmed you or harmed your family, and we'd say, well, say, Levy, you know, you don't really have to comply with the rules if you don't want to. It affects your health. It affects the welfare of the entire community, of which we're part of. And for us, we're limited. We're at the jurisdictional area of the Wetlands Protection Act and the Town Bylaw Article 2. So we're not the supreme council to decide who can do what where. So our jurisdiction in this case is, okay, we've got an area that's a sensitive area. That's why you're here before us, because you can't do whatever you want in that area. We have jurisdiction over it. So we're saying, look at this proposal. We think it's a good proposal. We like what you're trying to do. We appreciate the care that you seem to be taking to do it. And there's no doubt in my mind what you propose is a benefit, not just to the town, but to your neighbors and to the community. What we have to be sure of is we don't have a negative impact on our resource area, because that's our jurisdiction. And I think, you know, looking at it from that standpoint, yes, it puts a burden on the applicant. Every single time we issue conditions to an order of conditions, we're putting a burden on an applicant. There's no doubt. And we've had people come before us wanting to, you know, mitigate or eradicate invasive species. And they could easily, you know, without following the rules, just get it done a hell of a lot cheaper. But they follow the rules to make sure that there's no negative impact on the resource area. And that's the right, responsible thing to do if you're a part of a community. And believe me, that's one of the reasons we take enforcement so seriously, because we understand there are people who feel that they're above the needs of the community, and the needs of the community are not beneath their needs, in my view. So they will be punished.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I say something? So on the property that Mr. Lopez mentioned, I remember that one was about the disconnection of the cesspool and connect to the existing town sewer, correct? That was approved.
If you say so. I mean, look,
Yes. So-
that's not before us tonight, but go ahead. You can talk about it for a very
Okay.
brief time.
Yes, so when Mr. Lopez saying about the unfair burden placed on him about testing because of prehistoric contamination, a cesspool that's probably in the area in the groundwater table is subject to a lot of chemical contamination, such as drain cleaners, chlorine, bleach, all other household chemicals, and yet that was there for decades and leached in the groundwater, and there was no historic testing required for that one. Just
So
want
let me say, so your argument is, if somebody else got away with it, we should let
No,
Mr.
I'm not
Lopez.
getting, I'm just
get away with
saying,
it. I
I'm
don't
not
buy that
arguing that.
argument.
I'm just saying that
We could have made a
quite
mistake
similar
in
area.
that case, and if we did, I apologize. But because we made a mistake once doesn't mandate we make it again. Okay, I mean, I don't. That's not a winning argument with me. So I'll just tell you right up front, that's not a winner with me. I understand your point, but I don't think it's relevant to how I feel we need to address each case that comes before us.
Mr.
Because
Cohen, Mr. Cohen, just to make mention of that, it wasn't intended to cause an argument. The reason I had mentioned that property was it's my own concern with doing testing, and that property was about 3 parcels down, and it's running downstream. So again, my concern was if I'm required to test, to drill borings and test the water and etc., that cesspool is one of the many things that can still be leaching into the ground. So I'm just, that's the only reason I mentioned. I didn't mention it to say that the board made a mistake with I mentioned it because it's relative to my property, and I would hate for that property, who, again, people did things, I'm not saying the board, I'm saying the owners did things perhaps not the correct way, and now I'm going to test, and the actual source of possible contamination maybe isn't even my property. If I'm testing the water, or I'm testing again, the water beneath the ground, the soil tests, I understand, that surface tests, but those 21Es are obviously not just for that. They're also to test the water beneath and et cetera. So again, I just want to mention that I wasn't looking to start an argument or anything. I just mentioned that property because it's in relation to mine.
Understood. Thank you for that clarification. Eduardo, could you just read that second condition again? I just want to hear it again, please.
So the second condition was that the site needs to be certified free and clean of any hazardous or special wastes, oils, and grease, or the contaminates discharging or potentially discharging into the surface or groundwaters on or adjacent to the site.
Mr. Chairman, I had a question.
Please, you may speak.
In reference to Mr. Reum's suggestion of an alternative test, and forgive me as my knowledge is green on that said test. But if it were to suffice as an initial starting point, is there an opportunity to make a contingency to postpone any further developments with the project until that initial first test is run in the form of like a continuance of the project? Just wondering if maybe that's worth exercising as a starting point. Your thoughts?
No, I think you're saying something, Liz, that's very important, which is there anything, and that's what I think Rich was trying to do, is say, hey guys, here's something you might want to consider as a bridge between one position and the other. Okay. And that might be it. I'm just not sure. Eduardo will have to fill me in. Would that be sufficient to provide the staff with the satisfaction that they know that they're not, there's no contamination, or at least where you most likely would find it before that starts, or they want the entire site to be tested? I guess that's a question I'd have to ask, and that's why I wanted the condition read again, and I still didn't get any relief on that. But that's why I wanted to hear it again, because look, we're not trying to put an unnecessary burden. I think if there was that impression, it's not. I mean, our job is to try and protect the resource area, and at the same time try to do what's right by the developer, but we still have to protect the resource area. And my trouble in listening to this is we have one side saying we don't need to do it, and the other is our staff saying no, you need to do it. So we have to do something out there. I think my view is I'm glad that they got Frank Corp to take and be there when the vehicles are removed, and to take any action that might be necessary as a result of the vehicles removal. I think that was correctly stated. That was one of the requirements from the last meeting, and I think they took that seriously, and I think that's an appropriate response to the concerns. But not doing the testing up front before we have a problem, that is a problem for me. I'm trying to see whether there's something in between what I think I heard on condition number 2, as read twice, and what Rich said. And if there is, I mean, Eduardo, do you have any comments on that?
I think Rich certainly does bring in a good bridge towards a resolution for both parties, I suppose. But I would say I'm not familiar with how extensive that type of testing that Rich mentioned is, or yeah, so I guess that would be my main concern.
on that either. I mean, I heard we wanted some certification that the site is not contaminated, and I'm doing it in my words, not the way you said it. You were much clearer and cleaner, but some certification the site is not contaminated before any activity occurs. I don't think that's unreasonable, but I'm not sure I understand from that what the scope is, if you understand me, because that has, depending on how that's interpreted, it can either be a relatively expensive proposition or something that is not that expensive and you do it because it makes sense. Like, let's not have a problem after we've start digging type of problem. So, I just don't know what that condition number 2 would entail in terms of how much work to the applicant. I mean, and I don't want to end up kicking the can down the road and say, well, let's go back and look at this again, because I'm sure that now the weather seems to be breaking. I'm sure that Mr. Lopez would like to get started on some of this project actually, and so I take that into account too.
Mr. Commissioner, may I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
So these vehicles have been there for a while, right? There's what, no fuel in them, in the tanks? Is that my understanding? Am I understanding that correctly, Alphonse?
Well, there seems to be no fluids which have come out, apparently, according to
Have we?
the engineer.
Yeah.
Okay,
Correct.
that he went down and looked around under as best
Yeah,
he
but-
could underneath, and he
I
didn't
got
see
underneath the
any
vehicles.
evidence of fuels coming out, anything coming out. I don't know whether there's any fuel in the tank. It wasn't represented. They were empty or full. We don't know.
It's
Um,
hard to check. Sorry to interrupt, but it's very
No, I
difficult.
realize that. Yeah, you.
Well, what
the
about
only thing
the-
you did say was you didn't think there was anything in the water tank or the.
The water tank
My-
was dry. That's the fresh water they keep for the bathroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that
Yeah,
was the
I've-
only representation of what was in the tank was regarding the water. And so, but the representation was made that there was nothing that the engineer observed when he got around and sort
Yeah.
of partially under these things. He showed us the pictures, they're part of the record. To the extent that he could, he didn't see any obvious evidence of
Yeah.
leakage.
No, I got all that. I was just, without knowing if there's anything in the tanks, I don't really know what what sort of game plan you can do. I think Frank Corp would be able to tell you. There's like I see them at work all the time. They have like gas wicks that they drop down to the tanks, and they tell you how much is in there, if there's anything in there. And a tank like that, especially a tank like that tank should be relatively easy to see into. With it's like a big truck tank. It looks like, it's a big 40-gallon
Mhm.
truck tank. It looks like it should have a big opening on the side. You should be able to flash a flashlight in there. It's not going to have a big tube floating around to drag it to a different part of the car. You're just going to open up the hole on the side and look in there. Now, what I'm getting at here is if those things are empty, then if they did drip into the ground, that's probably been long gone. I mean, I'm no petrochemical expert or anything like that, but I would assume that the evaporation of gas or oil, like Rich was saying, you'd be able to see the oil stains, but of gas, I wonder if it wouldn't evaporate, if it was, again, if this had been a long time ago. So that's my question there is, like, how can we act on this without knowing if there's anything in the tanks? If there's something, and again, Frank Corp would be able to tell you that. You could probably go down there and unscrew the tank cap and take a gander in there too. Because if you look at that thing, that's a big tank. I don't see it having like a long tube to get the gas from where you put the gas nozzle in there. But
I think
I'm no expert, so that was my just kind of.
No, it's a good observation, and I think you're right. It's probably a good thing.
I think perhaps testing the soil underneath the vehicles would allow us also to see if there has been any hydrocarbons that have been that persist in the soil.
Well, are we, that brings up a question I have. Are we concerned only with what's under the two vehicles, or is there any other concern that was the reason why there was a requirement to do site testing? Because you did say site testing, which is far more than just those two areas. So if we're limited to those two areas, then I think the cost is much more reasonable. And the time to do it would be very much right after the vehicles are like lifted, really, or moved out, however they're going to do it, then test before you do anything else.
I would assume most of the contamination would be isolated within underneath those vehicles since they've been there for quite a long time. I know oil in particular can persist in the environment for months to years, depending on the amount that is released. So my assumption is that if there are no oils or contaminants underneath those vehicles, there may not be any other oils or contaminants within the site, but that's
Well, I
just
think
a
your assumption is in keeping with what I was thinking. That's why I asked you to read that condition again. And I heard site, and I said, okay, because again, I'm trying to be mindful of the costs versus the benefit. And so Mr. Lopez's point of the cost, I'm not unmindful of it. I heard it. I listened to him, and I'm not disagreeing that these tests can be very expensive depending on how big of the site is and how many borings you have to do. But if we're going to limit it to what's in the area of the two vehicles, I don't think that's an overburdening by any means. But anyway, does anyone else have anything to say? I've been doing a lot of the talking, and I frankly, I think I've exhausted my feeble brain in terms of ideas here.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, just one question from me. If we were to have a contingency that the soil be tested under the location of those two vehicles, is the expectation we're limiting the test to just hydrocarbons, oil specifically?
No, I don't think that at all. We find out if there's what's there. We could have heavy metals. We could have batteries and whatever else, So I don't just do testing in those areas, and then any areas where you see staining, I think that would be appropriate. That's sort of a hybrid of what Mr. Rayum said, so we'll have the same thing, but I really do want to know what's under those vehicles.
Okay, this is Rich Rayum again. There are meters to be able to read heavy metals. An XRF is what it's called. Basically, it looks like a soldering iron. You just hold it down to the soil, and it reads out so much zinc, so much iron, so much chromium, so much cadmium to the parts per million. And we've done an assessment at junkyards and been able to surgically remove. Sometimes it was only 6 inches into the ground, and then we were reading clean. And so we were able to surgically remove the heavy metals and then just do confirmatory laboratory tests. And again, that's not a very expensive thing to screen the area under the vehicles for heavy metals and for total hydrocarbons.
Yeah, I think, Rich, that's an important comment that you just made, because if I remember the condition, it didn't say that they have to do how they do the testing. It just says they has to be certified by somebody that by someone with the proper credentials. So if they use that kind of equipment, or if they hired you and you did it and you certified it was clean of these various and sundry things, I think that's compliant. I don't think the condition specified exactly what has to be done. It didn't specify how many test borings, if they had to be test borings. It said it had to be certified that the site wasn't contaminated. And I'm going to use the word clean in this discussion. So I think that's an important comment that Mr. Rayum just made. I think we've been, going down the rabbit hole that it was going to have to be, a full-blown 21E phase 2. And I didn't hear that on this. If somebody can certify, who has the requisite, and a licensed site professional can certify that this, after they're doing their examination, this is a clean site, I think it satisfies the condition. So then, then it's their license on the line if they didn't do their work. But I mean, I'll take a licensed site professional's certification any day of the week. I mean, it makes sense. We do it. We have to make some assumptions. They know what they're doing and they did a good job. And I'll make that assumption because I think most of the, not most of, every one of the licensed site professionals I know do good jobs and are thorough and careful. So I'm that would be okay with me. I think that complies with what you read, Eduardo, does it not?
No, I would agree with that. Yeah. I would agree that it does fit within the parameters of the second condition.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you have some options, Mr. Lopez, is what I'm saying, as to how you satisfy that condition. It may not be a full-blown phase 2 on a 21E testing. Okay, there might. Mr. Rayum just gave you a couple of options that could perhaps, with a licensed site professional having done those, they can say yes, we believe this site to be contamination free, and they certify to that. Now you've met the condition. Rich, do you want to join the Conservation Commission? Just kidding. But I mean, that's we're trying to work with you. I know it doesn't seem like it, but that's why I'm struggling a little bit, because I need to make sure I can balance my obligations as a commissioner with what I know practically a development person has to work with. I mean, you don't have an inelastic, but your budget is your budget, and already you're probably above it a little bit, and you don't want to be above it where it becomes uneconomical to complete the project. I get that, and I think we can work. I think this option that Rich gave would be, and if it's compliant with that condition, and I've just heard it is, I think you might have a path forward. Commissioners, anyone else have anything they want to say? Going once, going twice. Okay, we've kind of run out of talk on this. So at this junction, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Nat.
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, at this juncture, I would entertain a motion to issue our standard order of conditions with standard conditions, as well as 2 additional conditions as read by Eduardo. And I'm going to call those conditions 1 and condition 2, but as read. So anyone want to make that motion?
So be it.
So moved.
Wait a minute, I've got to make a correction. It's on the plan, the plan dated March 5th, 2025. I forgot that. That's important.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Nat.
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. The second public hearing, it's a continued public hearing, DEP file 15-2763, NOI 2453. It's on the notice of intent from Carl M. Furman for the proposed demolition of a single-family residence and soil absorption system and the reconstruction of a new single-family residence, soil absorption system, utilities, and site work. It's on a barrier beach, coastal dune, both within land subject to coastal storm flowage and within the 100-foot buffer zone to a salt marsh. The regulations are 310 CMR 10.02, 10.04, 10.27, 10.28, 10.29, 10.32, and Section 360-2. It's on land described as map 87, lot 20, otherwise known as 13 Smith Avenue. May I have a motion to waive the reading?
So moved.
A second on that motion, please.
Second,
We have a seconded motion. Roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
James?
yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. We did receive an email request from the applicant to continue this until March 25, 2025. This is, to my knowledge, within the realm of acceptability. They haven't asked for other continuances. And there was also due to, in measure, our request or our speaking to the applicant's engineer, informing them that Mark Garrett would not be here this evening. So it's not totally at the applicant's request, but they agreed to comply with our request as well. And if there's anyone in the audience tonight that wants to be heard on this before we vote, just let me know. I don't see anyone, so I'll entertain a motion to continue this hearing until March 25, 2025 at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Second. Seconded motion on the floor. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. We're moving now to the third public hearing, and it's a continued public hearing on DEP file 15-2775. It's NOI 25-11. It's on the notice of intent from Michael Ferry and Jessica Schmitz to construct a swimming pool, tennis court, and driveway at an existing dwelling within the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland and land subject to coastal storm flowage. The applicable regulations are 310 CMR 10.02, 10.04, 10.55, and Article 2 of the Town of Dartmouth bylaws. It's on land described as map 113, lots 33 and 35-1. It's otherwise known as 6 and 8 High Street. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. Is there someone here this evening? I think there is, probably Richard.
Yeah, Rich.
Speak on behalf of the applicant.
Yes, and also Andrew Benavides from my office is here because he knows how to share his screen and I don't.
It's always good to have assistance on those things.
So he actually did the majority of the drafting on this. Barbara Ferry lives at 6 High Street, which is a property right on the water. It's a home that's been there for many, many years. And they want to construct a swimming pool on that lot. And they recently bought the adjacent lot, which is a buildable lot. And they want to build, it's a combination tennis court, basketball court for the grandkids to be able to play basketball. This particular plan that's shown up here shows the house. At the top of the page is High Street, and the existing driveway actually goes over the abutter's property and into the garage, and then a circular drive around the house. And then there's a broad lawn down to the ocean. And the proposed pool, this is existing conditions. Andy, can you switch it to the proposed? This is showing the proposed pool. There are no regular bordering vegetated wetlands within 100 feet of this, but it is in a floodplain. So the performance standards is that you assure that it have stable ground cover. And so we're going to have obviously a swimming pool and the deck around it, and everything will be stable. We're showing silt fence to protect the environment. That's on that central portion. At the bottom left of this plan is a tennis court. That's the other lot. Incidentally, their kids are the ones that actually own the land, the trustees of the trust. So the bottom left of the plan showing the proposed tennis court. And what we propose is to have a trench drain along the entire down gradient side of that court. So any water running off of the court doesn't head towards the Greens property. We've sketched in very lately the proposed green residence. And if we hadn't put it in that trench drain, it would be increased rate of flow towards that proposed structure. So we intercept it with that drain and bring it to a leaching catch basin that's to the right, which is south of the field. And any overflow from that structure drains into the wetlands and away from the Greens proposed dwelling. And again, we'll have silt fence all the way around. There's also just south of the circular drive around the home, there'll be some additional gravel parking areas just for visitors, and some paths that run through the woods. And there is bordering vegetated wetlands on the green property and on the so we're showing the 25-foot offset and the 100-foot offset, and it just about clips the tennis court in those gravel areas. So there's a detail on the very right of this plan showing the leaching catch basin and the elevation at which point it would overflow. So the majority of the storms during most of the year would infiltrate into the groundwater. And at the very wet time of the year, heavy rainstorms would just overflow into the wetlands, as would occur now. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Eduardo, I'd like to hear from staff and staff's comments on this.
So going off of what Richard Rio was saying, so the pool, the security fence, the portions of the proposed deck, steps, portions of the P-stone driveway, and paths, portions of the parking area, portions of the proposed tennis courts and its side slopings and security stockade fence all fall within conservation jurisdiction. None appear to impact the associated performance standard and do not impact any protectable wetland interests or values. I know there have been some abutters have raised some issues with aesthetics of the area, including both visual and noise. Relative to visual aesthetics, there is no activity threatens the aesthetics of or to the wetland specifically, the commission may want to recommend the installation of screening evergreen vegetation as a visual preference along the roadside edge of the tennis courts. And relative to noise as an aesthetic, noise has no relevance to the wetland issues at hand and is regulated through the public health and building departments. Given that, staff recommends issuing a standard order of conditions in accordance with the proposed improvement plan dated February 28th, 2025, with one addition to include all new fencing shall allow a bottom gap of 4 to 6 inches to allow for wildlife passage.
Thank you, Eduardo. Does any commissioner wish to speak on this?
Yes, I do, Mike, if I could have a moment of the commission's time for a second.
You have the floor.
Thank you. Rich, are there going to be any pickleball courts?
No,
No, there will be no pickleball played or lines put in or the court built so it could allow pickleball?
to tell you the truth, I've never seen a pickleball court. This is sized as a standard basketball court, and it happens to have the ability to have a net in the middle, and the line work would be for tennis and be painted for tennis. It's actually not a precast, a post-tensioned concrete slab, installed by professionals. So I don't believe there'll be any pickleball played on it.
Well, I appreciate that, Rich, but there are many tennis courts today that are easily converted into pickleball, where they can play pickleball and they can also play tennis. And my question again, I asked, is there any intention of a pickleball court being placed there?
I know of none, but I'm not privy. The Ferries are my age. They're old coots. They're not going to be playing pickleball.
Rich, I appreciate that, but that's not the issue here. Mr. Ferry's son and his wife will be using that. They are trustees of it, and they are not, as you said, old coots. I'm the same age as Mr. Ferry, and I know their children and their sons are much younger. So again, I'm asking, if you say that there is no intention at this time for the pickleball, would you so indicate that?
I actually said that I know of no intention. I think that's a matter of you're just knocking on the Ferry's door and having the discussion that you're not interested in the noise, and you're not interested in the early morning or late night gaming in that area. But it's nothing to do with the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. It's 100%.
I don't agree with that, Rich. I believe that the Dartmouth conservation bylaws do address aesthetics, and I consider noise as part or a factor of aesthetics. And noise there, pickleball in and of itself is an extremely loud sport. Also, people who are playing it are loud. So I believe noise pollution plays an important part of the aesthetics of that. And so I'm going back to knock on a door. I appreciate that. And a handshake is only as good as the person in back of a handshake. But things change, people change, land is sold, et cetera, and the neighbors around there will be greatly inconvenienced by the noise, even of tennis. It's very, very close to their property line, and I'm sure there are some people here today who are the neighbors there and will attest to that. And again, the tennis court is one thing, but let me ask you another question. What are you going to use, or is there any plan for noise abatement so their neighbors of so many years won't be disturbed by the enjoyment of the Ferries in using the tennis court or pickleball, because we still don't know? what is the plan for noise abatement? And again, I consider noise pollution as part of the aesthetics of this, and it's clearly commented on in the Dartmouth conservation bylaws. What is the plan, if any, as it relates to noise abatement? So the neighbors who are living there won't be affected. And also there's going to be an issue that if there is noise, especially with pickleball, wildlife could be affected, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm asking, what aesthetics for noise abatement is being proposed?
There are no specific measures to dampen noise. Trees don't dampen noise. Thick timber is the only thing that can mitigate for noise propagation.
No, I appreciate that, Rich, but again, if there were noise abatement around the walls of the tennis court, the chain link fence, that would at least do something in some shape, fashion, or form to mitigate the noise. So the neighbors, and there are several of them, not several, there are quite a few of them, are going to be hearing this noise and it's going to disturb them. And I consider that part of it a part of aesthetics, which are clearly outlined in the bylaws of the Dartmouth Conservation. And I just want to know what, if any, noise abatement is going to be put up to at least help minimize the inconvenience of the neighbors concerning rackets down there, playing pickleball, which we still don't know the answer if that's going to be put in, or tennis. I believe the Ferries do have the right to develop their property. I do, but I also believe aesthetically, and again, which I believe is part of the bylaws now, a concentration, that the neighbors also have the right to peace and quiet of their own homes. And from my review of the plans, it's very, very close to their property, very close. So again, respectfully, the people who are using the tennis courts can be, in some shape, fashion, or form, cause a problem with noise and the non-enjoyment of other people's homes who have been there for years and years. Now, I appreciate knocking on Mr. Ferry's door, speaking to Paul, that's one thing, but that doesn't cut it for long term, and I think you know that. So I'm just asking again, what, if any, noise abatement is going to be proposed now or in the future to help minimize the noise and minimize the disturbance of neighbors? That's what I'm asking.
So we would be amenable to a condition that says efforts shall be made to mitigate noise as much as practical.
Well, Rich, I've known you for a very, very long time, and you're talking like a lawyer now. Okay, that's just mumbled. With all due respect, Rich, with all due respect, again, I know you and I like you, but that's not the answer to the question. That's not it. The neighbors have the right to peace and quiet. And if it's going to be noise, fine. Let's see what the Ferries who are doing this are going to do to help mitigate the noise so neighbors will in no shape, fashion, or form be disturbed because other people are making noise, which is just beyond comprehension. And again, I think this is a part of conservation. The bylaws, in my opinion, can be interpreted that way. So again, I appreciate your suggestion, but that's only a suggestion. And I think on the proposal, I think it should be far more dispositive, far more clear, completely laid out as to what they're going to do to mitigate noise damage. So their neighbors of so many years won't be affected.
Okay, the Greens dwelling is a proposed dwelling, and to the north is the Chiasis dwelling that a new owners, and I know of no other residents that would actually hear a tennis court or basketball game.
Excuse me, Rich. Sorry, this is my name's Ted Manley. I'm a resident at 24 High Street, which is immediately to the north. My property abuts the proposed construction area. And so yeah, and just as an aside, by the way, thank you, Rich Mallon, for bringing this up in the committee. It is a concern for us. My wife and I can see the area that's been clear cut. It's no farther than 100 feet from my back deck. So to the extent that there are activities being performed there that could be disturbing, we would be impacted. Okay. And I guess the other question I would have, so that's just sort of a statement on noise. We would be impacted. Another question I would have has to do with lighting. Do you, Rich, happen to know whether these courts will be lit at night, whether there will be flood lighting?
Well, no, there won't be floodlighting, but I don't know what kind of lighting would be provided. I can find out.
Well, again, Rich, I think Ted has brought up a very good point, and I think there has to be further clarification of this. So reasonable people can sit down and reasonably work something out to try their best so the ferries can use their properties as they see fit, but their neighbors will not be disturbed. Now there's an issue of lighting. And I think there should be a more definitive explanation as to what's going to be done concerning noise abatement, either through planting of shrubbery. Now, you say it doesn't do that much to abate it, but it will at least do something to do it. Now, we can go on and on with this, Rich, on and on. So I'm suggesting that there be a consideration, you speak with your clients, and to see what, if anything, they are going to propose to cut down the noise abatement as it relates to playing tennis, as it relates to playing basketball, as it relates to pickleball, which there still has been no definitive answer as to whether or not that's going to go in down the line, and also lighting. What's going to go? You haven't given us an answer. Will they be doing lighting? Well, you said they may not. I'm sorry, Rich. I think we have to have more definitive answers. I'm repeating myself as to these issues. And I think the Conservation Commission is perfectly in order to ask these questions. And that's exactly what I'm doing.
Okay, so are you recommending a 2-week continuance so that we have time to address those issues?
Well, let
I'm
me ask.
asking that these issues.
Hold
be
on a
addressed.
second. I'm the chair. Okay. Okay. So let me ask this question. There's been some comments made relative to neighbors concerned. Do you believe, Rich, your clients and you can address those concerns in time for our meeting in 2 weeks?
Yes, I believe we can.
Okay. So I think to cut to the chase, I think we can, and there's certainly maybe others that want to speak tonight, but I think it's incumbent, rather than just reiterate the concerns, to see what the applicant and Rich can come up with that might address those concerns and put people better at ease. Okay. And I'd rather do that and have that discussion than just to reiterate that people are concerned. And if you think 2 weeks will do it, I'm fine. Personally, it'd be a good idea to put it in the plan if there's going to be lighting, where it is and what kind. If there's not going to be lighting, so state. If pickleball is something that the ferries believe they're going to want to do, it should just be stated. Let's just put things out there. I'm looking at this from the standpoint of transparency, and I'm sure that sometimes when things are stated unequivocally, people feel much better about it than wonder what else is going to happen. So I think that's a good suggestion to push this out for 2 weeks.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Commissioner, may I jump in just for a quick second, please? The papers that we received as the butters from Prime Engineering did relate that there was no lighting that was going to be included in the project. So I'm just going to offer that. I think that's important. My question though is really more conservation specific, and I see Dave Pichette is on here with us tonight as well, who's been working with us and has been so helpful. But the runoff from this tennis court, this is a pretty big impervious surface. And it's not a clay court. It's a hard surface. So there's the potential for a lot of runoff, and it's of course being pointed right at our property. And from an aesthetic standpoint, there's a ton of land that the ferries are controlling here. One way from aesthetics point, I kind of wish that there was some other options for them to place the court in a way that it wouldn't be up so close to all the neighbors on this side. There's plenty of room in the front of their house on the bay side, as an example. But I realize this is their decision, and they have to put things where that's their choice. But from a runoff standpoint, the message that this water is running down a trough that Mr. Room is it, do I pronounce your name properly, Room?
Yeah, Rion, yep.
Mr. Rion is designed and going into a holding tank. And then when it's especially rainy, it has no place to go but onto our property and into our wetlands that we have, as the commission knows, we've been working, with everybody's help for over a year and a half to protect all that wetlands. And I'm just wondering if there are issues there and if there's another way that the location of the tennis court could be put so that it is putting our land in jeopardy, and the wetlands that we're trying to protect in jeopardy from this extra runoff. So I raised that question first and foremost. And the other issue in terms of aesthetics and planting, there's a gentleman named Steve Simpson who I saw his name on some of the forums that's working with the ferries, and he's a terrific landscaper, and we've worked with him in the past. And I know that the ferries have wonderful taste, and at the end of the day, all this will look very nice, and will be in addition, I think, a favorable one to the neighborhood in one way. But I would agree with Mr. Manley and other abutters, Mr. Mallon, that the sound of this will be resounding all through the neighborhood, all the way over to Ricketson's Point. So we're not the only ones who are going to be hearing it. So I just think anything that the commission can do to protect the neighborhood in terms of the aesthetics and the sound is one thing, but in particular for my property, where we've been working so hard to protect the wetlands, to see if there's some way that we can relocate the tennis court and or have Mr. Reum and his team look at another way of managing the runoff, so we don't have to deal with it. Thank
Well
you.
said. Rich, were you trying to say something?
No, I agree with the gentleman that just spoke. Which one, Rich Mallon or Rich Reum?
Rich Reum, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, okay.
I wasn't asking you, but thank you for your
I will bring all of these concerns up to the landscape architect and to Mrs. Ferry, and have a good, healthy discussion, and come back with improved plans.
Thank you.
If I may, for just a moment.
Well, I can't see who's talking.
Oh, me.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Going off of what Richard and Mr. Green were saying, and of course Mr. Mallon, I wonder if there's a possibility. I know Rich mentioned the sound of the courts and the balls and everything. I wonder if I'm not familiar with tennis courts material. I know some are made of clay, some are made of grass. I wonder if there's a potential material change which will help reduce the amount of noise coming from the tennis courts, as well as possibly some sort of sound absorbing panels or something you can put on the fences themselves to help absorb some of that noise coming directly to the neighbors.
Okay, I will investigate that.
Yeah, I can tell you, those are good comments, Eduardo. And the surface does make a difference, but you also get the sound of a ball coming off the racket. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And to be candid with you, that's sort of a repetitive sound. It depends on what you're familiar with. Okay. And there's different sounds a tennis ball hitting a tennis racket is a different sound than a pickleball hitting a pickleball racket. Okay. There's a sharper retort with pickleball, and the players are closer. So there's more frequency of ball hitting racket. Okay. But having said all of that, which is important, I guess, in my experience, though, it's when people play. Okay. And the complaints that I've read about in the newspapers is when you have lighted courts and people are playing late at night. And I think we've all known of instances where, people, if there's lit courts, they'll be out there playing at midnight. And that can be disturbing no matter which game is being played. Okay. Probably more so with pickleball, but it's certainly an issue even with tennis. And I will tell you this much. I know that if you go back to your drawing board and you think about it, there's probably things that can be done that will ameliorate some of these concerns, maybe not make them go away. And if I heard Mr. Green correctly, Rich, you've got to look at the issue on drainage of that tennis court, because his comment was, it sounds like you've got a plan, but is that going to protect the wetlands? And he's right. There's a lot of wetlands on his property that would be impacted by any surface water runoff. So that might be something to spend a little time with.
Could I ask a couple of follow-up questions, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you may. Go right ahead.
Dave Pichette, helping out Mr. Green on this issue. I was just curious to ask Mr. Rayum what the setup is for the runoff with the tennis court, what storm that was designed for. So in terms of what storm level will that absorb versus if it goes beyond that, will it run over? And secondly, if anything had been looked into in terms of the leaching basin to depth of groundwater, to how much you have there in terms of room for a leaching type basin there, if those issues have been looked at.
So we didn't do hydrologic computations because it isn't required, because you're on the ocean. You're basically, Mr. Green is at the bottom of the hill, the water runs downhill. So it's running to his property now, and it's going to continue to run. What we've done is designed the system to divert it away from running into his house, that is currently happening now. We're diverting it to the wetlands, where you're getting clean runoff into the wetlands, runs through the wetlands to the ocean. So there isn't a need under the Wetlands Bylaw or the Wetland Protection Act to mitigate for the rate of flow. We just made sure that it would be running into the wetlands to the benefit of the wetlands.
Okay, I do think there is a difference between the impervious surface you're going to have with the court versus natural vegetation in terms of what's going to be absorbed, and also in terms of the velocity that it's going to run over the land. So just my comment on that note. And secondly, more of a question for the commissioner, the chair. There's already been a lot of work done on that site already prior to the issuance of an order of conditions. And I'm just curious if that's been addressed in terms of the commission's typical protocol for work being done on a site prior to approval.
Well, we don't usually allow any development that is within our jurisdiction without approval. Okay,
so Mark Garrett did go down when some landscapers went down and prematurely started cutting trees, and he determined that it was out of the commission's jurisdiction, and the Ferries agreed not to have them do any further work, even in the areas outside the jurisdiction, until this thing occurred. And so it's been many, many weeks that no work has been done on the site. They would love to start working next month, but we'll hold them off until we've resolved all of these issues.
With all due respect, with anyone who's been on that land, they can, it's, I mean, it's been the number of trees that have been taken down, and it was, virtually clear cut. It's really quite remarkable. And I think that's, going back to the sound issues, it's amazing. I never had any idea of how many neighbors we really had until all of a sudden now we can see them all. And so sadly, there's no point in stopping the tree cutting because there's no more trees left to cut. So there is that. Going back to Mr. Pachette's point about the water runoff is, we've been on that, Les and I have been on that land many, many times over the last year and a half since we purchased it. And with rain and snow and sunshine, and there has never been any wet areas between this proposed port area and the wetlands area that we inherited when we purchased the land. So the wetland, the water that's there is not coming from the ferry's new property at all. But I would agree with Dave that the imperviousness of that tennis court and the size of it will create, I'm not an engineer. You all, Mr. Reaume and Dave and the commissioner, you all know how this works. And Mr. Ford, there's an issue with water running onto our land. There will be. And is that okay? Or does the commission have any opportunity to protect my land after all the efforts that we've been undertaken to do just that over the last year and a half?
Well, I can speak on behalf of the commission. Our job is to protect the resource area, not necessarily some individual's land, but to the extent that a resource area exists on your land, the answer is yes. We have an obligation to protect our resource area, and there are performance standards. So just water flowing into a wetlands isn't necessarily going to have an adverse impact on them. But we will look, I think that's what we've asked Mr. Reaume to do, in addition to the issues on sound or aesthetics rather. We've asked him to put a plan together that with his client, we'll address those issues, and then we review them and we see what we can either approve or disapprove. And of course, we listen to the public because everyone has a right to be heard. Doesn't necessarily mean a right to have us agree with, but a right to be heard. And we do take our job pretty seriously, as you well know from the previous experiences. We don't set about just willy-nilly granting approvals, okay? And if we do grant approvals, they're usually with reasonable conditions to assist the development in a fashion that it will not have an adverse impact on our resource area. And that's our job. I mean, we really don't go beyond that. There are other boards and commissions in town that may have jurisdiction over other things, and we certainly don't pretend to be the supreme controller of everything that gets developed in Dartmouth. We do, though, take the job of protecting the wetlands areas in the town and the resource areas, including buffer zones, pretty seriously. So yeah, to the extent that this has an impact on wetlands, we're all ears and eyes.
Mr. Chair, may I make a point, please?
You can make a point, Richard.
Thank you very much. I believe what Mr. Green said and what Dave said is absolutely spot on concerning the issues that must be addressed. Also, to the best of my knowledge, and if I'm wrong, then I'll stand corrected, but I do not think I am, a tremendous amount of large, very large trees were taken down. And then I believe Mr. Garrett came out to the property. Now, we were talking prior, we have to follow the rules. And I don't know if those rules were maintained or adhered to in this particular case. Now, if I'm wrong in what I'm saying, I'll apologize, but I don't think I am. The rules are the rules, Mike, and I think you said that before.
They are. So I think if I heard Mr. Reaume correctly, he said that Mr. Garrett went out, and according to Mr. Reaume, the determination was made that what work had been done at that point was not within our jurisdiction. So if that's correct, then no rules have been broken. But we can easily find out when Mr. Garrett's back exactly what he said. Okay. So, again, like I said a moment ago, we're not the supreme controllers of everything that happens in the town. Our job is pretty limited to the protection of the wetlands and the resource areas, including buffer zones within the town. And if Mark went out and made a determination that what had been done was not in those areas, then it wasn't illegal. It wasn't violation of a rule. So I'm not going to condemn anybody till I know the truth. Okay, I got to find a little more facts before I know.
If I may, Mike.
Sure.
So I do remember Mark coming back from that field report trip. And I remember him mentioning to me that he went out there, spoke with the company that was clearing the trees, and he mentioned to me that they had done I believe a wetland line over there, and based off his brief look at it, it seemed like the work that was being done was outside of our jurisdiction when it came with the cutting of the trees.
Okay. And you know what, that may well be the case. But all I'm trying to say is before I say somebody did something in violation of the town rules, I'd want to know more facts, right? Because at least at first blush, and I understand that wasn't a delineation of a wetlands line, but at first blush, Mark tended to think this could be outside of our jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is, then it's not a violation of our rules. If it was within our jurisdiction, then as Mr. Mallon said, it's exactly as the first public hearing was, what are the rules? They apply to everybody the same way. Okay, but if they're outside of jurisdiction, no, they don't.
If I may make one more quick suggestion. So I do play tennis, and so I've been around to quite a few courts, and I suppose going off of what Mr. Green said about the drainage problems, I don't remember if this is what they're called, but I do remember seeing, I believe it's, again, I am not an engineer or deal with stormwater very, very much, but I believe sometimes they do put something called a French drain at the edge of tennis courts to help relieve any stormwater that does run off of that impervious surface. So maybe that's something Mr. Riom can look into as well to help deal with that.
Yeah, any suggestions that might assist in mitigating the surface water runoff onto abutting properties? And I understand Mr. Riom's point. Well, it's already going there because water goes downhill, but the volume is one thing, the velocity is another. So I think it's important. We'll be looking at that fact. We'll be looking at those issues in addition to the aesthetics that were originally brought up. And I look forward to seeing Mr. Riom's plan as revised.
Mr. Chair, one final administrative question from me.
Yes.
Mr. Green, apologies if you already stated it, but could you either state or restate your full name and address just for the record and my knowledge?
Well, of course, I'm sorry for not introducing myself. It's Randy Green. My wife Leslie and I bought the land adjacent to the ferry property in October a year ago, and have had a number of issues in front of the commission. In fact, I think the earlier one tonight came up. There was something about a field report that was item number 1 on the agenda tonight. I'm sorry, I was a little late signing in, but didn't get the. But maybe you could share that with me or with Dave Frechette later. But in any event, my full name is Arthur Randolph Green Jr., Leslie Ann Green, Greene, and we are currently residents in Florida and hoping to build a house apparently right next to a tennis court.
Okay, so this is the property just to the west of the applicant's property.
That's
sounds
correct,
like.
yes.
Okay,
So there's
thank
if you zero in on that, Mr. Watson, there, on the real, if you've seen the plans, it shows the proposed house location.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Well, final point too, I mean, just for the issue of aesthetics, I mean, we will likely, if the court is placed where it has been proposed and that all the other issues that are before the commission are resolved and they're given a green light, we will probably try to figure out a way to we have a very, very small building envelope because of the wetlands have advanced so much over the course of the last 20 years. And we don't have a lot of other options, but we can change the shape of the house and hopefully move it a little bit more towards Elm Street and away from High Street to try to give us a little level of protection. Unfortunately, not very much. And as we all know, the sound issues that we've discussed tonight are things that we will have difficulty escaping. But we do have some options. And finally, the Ferries are awfully nice family, and they have. As like I said, Steve Stimson, the architect that they're using, landscape architect, does unbelievable work. So I think at the end of the day, it will all look nice. But my interest and concern again was just the wetlands and trying to protect that after all the work that we've been through with the town and with the commission. And so I appreciate everybody's time and efforts here.
Thank you. So, commissioners, looks like it'll take a couple of weeks for Mr. Rayum and his client to make adjustments to their plans to present for our consideration. So unless anybody else wants to be heard this evening, I will entertain a motion to continue this public hearing until Tuesday, March 25, 2025 at 7 p.m., at which time anyone who's interested will have an opportunity to speak, even if they've already spoken this evening.
So moved.
We have a motion on the floor.
Second.
We have a seconded motion. We'll have a roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. Anyone who's here this evening, please mark it on your calendars. There will be no letter sent out like there was for the first meeting. So you'll mark it on your calendars. It will be posted on the town website, but there will be no publication in the newspaper and no certified mail. We're moving on now to the fourth public hearing. It's public hearing DEP file 15-2776 NOI 2512. It's on the notice of intent from Peter and Deborah Gates for the removal of invasive vegetation by hand within the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. The applicable regulations 310 CMR 10.02, 10.55, as well as Article 2 of the Town of Dartmouth bylaw. It's on land described as map 102, lot 10. It's otherwise known as 16 Shore Acres Road. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion. Roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. On behalf of the applicant.
You've got Rich Rayum again.
Yeah.
And Andrew from my office will share his screen to show the site on Shore Acre Road. On the left, you can see the Gates existing dwelling, and it runs all the way over onto the abutting lot, which they also own. That's all lawn running to that point. Goddard Environmental delineated the wetlands, and the area between the wetlands and the lawn has had a lot of invasive plants come in. Rosa multiflora bittersweet, and the like. And the gates would like to have landscapers come in and remove those invasive plants by hand, just basically cut them down at ground level. And they may have to come back several times over the next couple of years to make sure that they've eradicated them. And obviously, anything that is not an invasive plant would be left. There are some trees and there are some non-invasive shrubs in there, and they will be left undisturbed. That's why we're not allowing anybody to come in with a brush hog. The idea is to have a professional landscaper come in and remove it with hand tools, you know, handheld lobbing shears and the like. And that's all they want to do, just remove invasive plants.
Thank you. Eduardo, I'd like to hear staff's comments on this application.
So having spoken with Mark about this project in particular, we had some concerns about the project description, mainly that the only narrative that we have relative to the proposed work is rather vague. As it reads, hand removal of invasive vegetation from buffer zone. And so, given that, and given the undetailed plan that is labeled with the delineation wetland line, edge of lawn, and existing lawn, the two lawn designations are inconsistent with the vegetation cover depicted on the 2023 Mass GIS aerial photograph. The area for invasive plant control appears to fall within the area between the delineated wetland line and the edge of lawn designations. There's been some confusion between the edge of lawn and the existing lawn designations. And the on-the-ground conditions suggest that the actual edge of lawn designation is actually now the edge of the existing lawn area. The labeled existing lawn boundary does not appear to be accurate and should be removed from the plan. Some other questions we had about the project were the removal selective or clear cutting. What is the surface area of the area for invasive plant control? And what is the percentage of the proposed cover removal? Third point was, what is the intended outcome of the area for invasive plant control? Is it revegetation? Is it additional lawn area? Natural succession? That sort of thing. And another point was that if once that vegetation is removed, are there any erosion control devices to prevent that? And I suppose after the erosion control devices deteriorated or are removed. So our recommendation at the moment, given the details of the plan and everything that we know so far, we're recommending a continuance until those documented responses to the questions have been received and internally reviewed.
Thank you, Eduardo. Does any commissioner have any questions? Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to be heard on this application? All right, I'm not seeing any. So, Rich, you've heard the recommendation of staff.
Yeah,
Would you like an
I'll go along
opportunity
with
to
that.
address-
If the lawn area was not field located, we'll just have our survey crew go and actually locate the very edge of the lawn. My understanding is that survey crew did locate it. We were not proposing to disturb the ground surface, but so that there would just be a natural succession. But Eduardo is right. There's a paucity of description on the plan, and we can do a second plan with much more detail on exactly what's going to be done. So if you could continue it to March 25th, we'd be amenable to that.
I think that's a reasonable request. Is that enough time for you, Rich?
Is that what?
Is that enough time for you?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So, commissioners, you've heard the recommendation of staff. You've also heard that the applicant is requesting a continuance until Tuesday, March 25, 2025 at 7 p.m. So entertain a motion for such a continuance until March 25, 2025 at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Nat.
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. Our fifth public hearing is DEP file 15-2548, AOOC 25-1. It's on the request to amend an order of conditions from Glenn Lehman, care of Richard Rayum, to construct an attached garage and storage extension within land subject to coastal storm flowage. Applicable regs are 310 CMR 10.02, 10.04, and Article 2 of the Town of Dartmouth bylaws. The land is described as map 121, lot 7. It's otherwise known as number 1 Howland Avenue. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
moved.
Second.
We have a second on the motion. Roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Nat.
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. It looks like, Richard, this is your evening, so you've got the floor again.
Yeah, I know it seems like I'm going to participate in every public hearing that you're having this evening, but this is the last one, honestly. Andy, can you post the plan? This is at the very bottom of Howland Avenue, looking out at what we always call the Monkey Island. Existing home, well, this is the existing additions. There's an existing home, an existing garage with a dwelling unit above it and a driveway coming up to the garage from Howland, which is at the top of the page. Andy, can you put the proposed on there? We had come to the commission and gotten an order of condition to expand that freestanding garage. And that order is still valid. And so what we're looking for is to make it somewhat larger than it was before. It's more than 100 feet away from the wetlands, which is on the very left is Ponegantsit Bay, and there's a stone retaining wall. And so we're over 100 feet from that, but we are in the floodplain. And as I've said, the standard for the floodplain is that you have stable ground. And so originally he was proposing to build the garage closer to the street, but one of the neighbors objected to losing his view. So Mr. Lehman graciously said, well, let me just slide it back and expand what I've already got approval for. And we basically have some spot shots that run around. So any water running from east to west is diverted away from the house and away from the garage. So there's a little bit of grading, and the heavy dash line is the silt fencing. So that'll prevent any siltation to head towards the water. But the retaining wall that's at the water's edge is higher than the surrounding ground. So even if some silt was able to get by, that retaining wall would stop it. That's my total presentation.
Thank you, Rich. Eduardo, may we please have the comments of staff on this application?
So as we mentioned, the property does fall within the VE flood zone and is within the land subject to coastal storm flowage. Given this is an adjustment to the original plans, we're recommending a standard order of conditions in accordance with the proposed improvement plan dated January 18th, 2025. I'd like to also make another note that there has been some concerns from abutters about the use of the garage, and yeah, and pretty much its use.
So
Well,
I can
Let me
respond.
ask you a question. Rich, what, in this garage, what do you propose? I know you propose automobiles, et cetera, on.
And a workshop for Mr. Lehman, and storage above. Dartmouth zoning bylaws doesn't allow for expansion of the apartment. There's a strict limitation on the square footage of a unit, and it's basically held to the footprint of the original structure. So even our previous expansion did not include expanding the apartment or adding a second apartment. It's storage upstairs, garage and workshop downstairs.
All right, so if I'm understanding that correctly, so we're looking at an expansion on the garage, basically relocation from what had previously been approved, but an expansion, and that expansion will be expressly for storage above and the regular usage of a garage like automobiles, etc., on the first or ground floor, and there'll be no expansion of habitation space. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so I would recommend a consideration that we put an additional condition in our order of conditions that the expansion will not increase the square footage of the habitable area that it currently exists. Would that be?
That's an acceptable condition from Mr. Lehman.
Okay. I think that should ameliorate any concerns of any neighbors about an expanded use or an additional apartment or whatever the heck it might be. And that way, your client will still have what they're looking for, additional storage and a roomier garage to put things in.
Right.
And it's off of the street, so now the other neighbors won't have a problem with the view, which
Right.
was nice of him to do that. Commissioners, any questions? Is there anyone in the audience that wants to be heard? I don't see any, so at this point, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
We have a second motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Nat.
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. I'll now entertain a motion to issue a standard order of conditions on the plan dated January 18, 2025, with an additional condition that the expanded area will not include habitable space.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Nat.
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. Well, you can go to sleep now, Richard.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Take care. We now have public hearing number 6, which is a public hearing on DEP file 15-2778 NOI 2010 on the notice of intent from Edmund Craig to construct a proposed porch and deck, as well as replacement concrete patios and walkways onto an existing single-family dwelling. It's within land subject to coastal storm flowage and the 100-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland. The applicable regs are 310 CMR 10.02, 10.04, 10.55, as well as Article 2 of the Town of Dartmouth bylaw. The land is described as map 123, lot 202. It's otherwise known as 20 Mosier Street. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second,
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
James,
yes.
Nat,
Yes.
I vote as yes. That motion passes unanimously. And we have someone here this evening on behalf of the applicant.
Yes, hello. Chris Gilbert from Farland Co-op Engineering, representing the applicant and the owner of 20 Mosher Street. I'm going to share my screen.
Yes, you may.
Okay, can everyone see that?
I can. Thank you.
So this is 20 Mosher Street. It's a 20,000 square foot lot developed with a single family dwelling on the lot. The entire property is within land subject to coastal storm flowage. That originates from Clark's Cove, which is about 350 feet east of the property, which is the bottom of the plan. You can see here, we have the single family dwelling here. You got the driveway, paved driveway comes off of William Street and Mosher Street. And then in the backyard, there's a pool, large concrete patio. The concrete patio extends along the westerly side of the dwelling. And then we have a concrete walk here. And there's an existing porch here. And there's an existing deck here. The blue lines are the demarcation of the flood zones. The majority of the lot is in the middle here is a velocity zone elevation 19. We have a VE 20 here, VE 21, and then here in the northerly and westerly portion, we have an AE zone 16 with little AE zone 17 there. The grades of the yard, the pool patios around elevation 11. In the front here, we have elevation 13, 14. And then the finished floor elevation of the existing dwelling is around elevation 19.5. Also off to the northwest, this is a wetland, bordering vegetated wetland that was located by the conservation agent and shown approximately on this plan. And the purple line here is the 100-foot buffer to that wetland. Zoom in a little. Okay, what we're proposing today, so there's an existing small porch here. They're looking to expand it to about here with steps off either side. So there's that porch expansion, and then the concrete walkway will extend around the new porch area with a little bit of landscaping here. In the back, currently there's a retaining wall, stone retaining wall here, which retains a landscaping area here, and that wall extends. They're gonna be removing a portion of that stone retaining wall and the landscaped area. It's about 2 feet of fill there, so they'll be bringing that down to the grade of the pool patio, which is elevation 11. The fill will be removed from site. Portions of the retaining wall that they will use to extend the retaining wall here will be stockpiled here on site, along with anything else that needs to be stockpiled during construction. There will also be, we have a stepstone walkway just through the lawn area to allow access once they enter the gate here to the pool patio. Along with these additions, we also have this, sorry, there's a small deck here too as well. But along with these additions, all of the concrete shown on the site will be replaced. It's cracking and failing in certain areas. So they're looking to replace that in this current location that it is. So So the only proposed grading on site will just be the removal of about 2 feet of fill here to bring the grade down. This will allow for the underside of the screen porch to be a storage area. That will be enclosed with breakaway walls as it is in a flood zone. And then we have this line here is stake straw wattle erosion control, which will be set here and then around all the concrete areas, stockpile area, as well as the construction entrance from William Street. The proposed porches and decks will allow water to flow through during large storm events. And we're really not changing the grades, so we don't believe there'll be much effect as far as impact to the existing dwelling on the lot or any surrounding dwellings during storm events. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. Eduardo, I'd like to hear staff's comments on this application.
As Chris explained, and looking at the plans themselves, most, if not all of the work is landscaping or reconstruction work or within the fenced-in yard area. So based off that, we're recommending a standard order of conditions in accordance with the site plan dated 02/03/2025.
Okay. Does any commissioner have any questions? Is there anyone in the audience that wants to be heard on this application? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, I'll now entertain a motion to issue a standard order of conditions on file number 15-2778 on the plan that was dated February 3rd, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Our final public hearing tonight, yay, hooray, is on DEP. We have a DEP file number 15-2779, NOI 25-15. It's on the notice of intent from Linda Vanderveer for an invasive vegetation management, quote, an ecological restoration limited project, end quote, at DNRT's Ocean View Farm Reserve, including mechanical removal of invasive shrubs, vines, and reeds, and the application of wetland-approved herbicide within a bordering vegetated wetland and the 100-foot buffer zone to the same. The applicable regs are 310 CMR 10.02, 10.55, as well as Article 2 of the Town of Dartmouth bylaws. The land is described as map 9, lot 36-2. It's on Allen's Neck Road. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded motion. Roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James? Up. He's off the line for a minute. Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. Is there someone here this evening on behalf of the applicant?
Yes, good evening, commissioners. Mr. Fortes, my name is Linda Vanderveer. I'm the land manager for DNRT, and I'll be presenting on behalf of the organization this evening.
Very good.
I may share my screen. I'd be happy to tell you more about the project.
Yes, you may.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So DNRT is proposing invasive vegetation management at our Ocean View Farm property, which is located on Allen's Neck Road down here way on the southern end of Dartmouth, and it's on the shores of Allen's Pond. We are proposing to treat approximately 4.9 acres of invasive shrubs, vines, and reeds on the property. And specifically, we are treating them with herbicide, and we're proposing to do this work in wetland resource areas that include bordering vegetated wetland, the 100-foot buffer to bordering vegetated wetland, and land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is essentially the velocity zone. And on this map, actually, I can zoom in here a little bit. That is essentially everything below this velocity zone 19 line here. Because of the size and the scope of the project, we filed a ecological restoration limited project. I should note that the entire project area is located within priority and estimated habitats of rare species. So accordingly, we have reached out to Natural Heritage to get a preliminary determination from them regarding the impacts or potential impacts on the project on rare species. We did receive that preliminary determination last week, and they indicated that the proposed work would not adversely impact the habitat of the rare wetland wildlife located on site, and that the project would be exempt from the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act because the proposed activity, which is removing invasive species from rare species habitat, is one of the exempt activities. We do not have their final determination. I don't anticipate getting that actually for a couple of weeks because they do have a 30-day turnaround time period, but we do at least have that preliminary determination. Before I get into the details of what we're going to do, I did just want to provide a little background on the property and the project. The project really builds on the success of prior invasive vegetation removal work that occurred on the property in 2018 and 2021, when the Commission and Natural Heritage granted us approval to do very similar work here along the southern edge of the property. That work was extremely successful. We removed this very, very dense thicket of vines and shrubs, and the natural seed base came back in. And so that area is now dominated by native shrubs, grasses, and flowers, some of which are very specific to and important to the rare species that we have on site. So we really wanted to sort of build on that success and try to transform the remainder of the southern half of the property into this much more native tableau that supports our native wildlife. So the work that we're proposing under this project can be divided into 5 work areas. Those work areas are identified by the kind of proposed activity that would occur within them. And the activity is identified or is informed by the plant composition within the area. So the areas that are outlined in blue here, this is work area 1, work area 2, and then work area 3. Those areas consist of invasive woody brush, so invasive shrubs such as multiflora rose, Morrow's honeysuckle, autumn olive. We've got strangling vines like bittersweet and Japanese honeysuckle. There's also porcelainberry, which creates this very dense smothering mat, and that's particularly true in work area 1. So these areas in blue are considered invasive brush, and the treatment for them will be a little different than the areas that are highlighted in pink, which are invasive brush mixed with Phragmites. Phragmites is a reed, so it requires a different treatment pattern. So the work that we're proposing in work areas 1, 2, and 3 is predominantly located within wetland buffer. Some of the areas are actually just in upland, and a small amount of the work in work area 3 is within bordering vegetated wetland. And you can see that the size of the areas here, 1 and 3 are both 1.5 acres, give or take. Work area 2, much smaller. This is about 4/10 of an acre. And this is essentially the area between the edge of the field and the stone wall that the farmer just over time has stopped mowing. And it has crept in with invasive shrubs primarily. Work area 4, and 5, again, these are the areas that also include Phragmites. This is the smallest area, work area 4, 0.05 acres. And then work area 5 is about 1.4 acres. And again, it has a pretty large stand of Phragmites in it. And the bulk of the work in this work area would be in bordering vegetated wetland. So the work that we are proposing actually starts with mowing by Bristol County Mosquito Control or manual cutting by DNRT. So Bristol County Mosquito Control this spring is set to mow with a low ground pressure excavator with a brush hog attachment about 3.4 of the 4.9 acres. That mowing activity is not included in this permit because they have their own authorization and notification process with the regulatory authorities. So I know they've already gotten their approval from Natural Heritage. There are some time of year restrictions that they have to follow. I'm not sure if they've been in touch with Mark or Eduardo or anyone at Concom yet. My understanding is that is actually a bit more of a notification process than an approval process. I'm not 100% sure on that, but the mowing work that they would do essentially precedes the herbicide work that we would do. There are some sensitive, there's a sensitive species in work area 3 that would require this area to be cut by hand. So that would not necessarily be affected by mosquito control's work. But the rest of it, we won't do anything until they've done the mowing. The anticipated mow time for them is this spring. We would then follow up in the invasive brush areas, which include all of area 1, all of area 2, all of area 3, and then the brushy portions of 4 and 5. So we would follow the mowing with what's called a cut stump treatment. And essentially I apply herbicide directly to the cut stump of the woody shrub or vine. And the herbicide we propose to use is a glyphosate-based product that is approved for work in proximity to wetlands. It would either be Aquaneat or Rodeo are 2 very common ones. And essentially, for the cut stump for us, we put it in a handheld bottle. It has a sponge applicator on the tip, and you apply the herbicide directly to the cut stump. It's a very targeted way of applying herbicide. We would do that over as much of this mowed area as possible. It's fairly large, so we're not going to get every stump. We have limited resources. The applications would be done by certified pesticide applicators, which include myself and a colleague at DNRT, as well as staff at Mass Audubon, who have the Allen's Pond Sanctuary right here next door. We would wait, so we would apply that this spring, then come, say, June, maybe even July. Anything that has either not been hit by herbicide or something that's grown up from seed would then actually be sprayed with that same wetland approved herbicide using it's a foliar spray. And that would be done with backpack sprayers. And so the idea really is you've cut the vegetation with the initial mowing, right? So you've reduced it from, significant, it could be 5-6 foot shrubs down to ground level. You've taken a first hit with a very targeted herbicide application. Then you follow up with this foliar spray. That is the only foliar spray we anticipate doing for the cut brush. We would then follow up annually with more cut stump treatments, and that would be in the fall or winter. We anticipate needing to do that for about 5 years, at least. Understanding that an order of conditions only lasts 3 years, we would likely be applying for an extension toward the end of year 3 to be able to continue this work. And just really to make sure that what we have started, we actually finish and it's effective. So we would do that, again, all of the areas highlighted in blue, as well as the brush that's in the pink areas. The Phragmites that's located in the pink areas will have a different treatment, again, because it's a reed. So that area would also be cut by mosquito control. However, it would be allowed to grow without being treated, and then it would be cut again in, say, June. That would be cut this time with brush blades on, you know, sort of like a weed whacker, handheld piece of mechanized equipment. That material would then, the Phragmites would be allowed to regrow again. And then come August, it would be hit with a foliar application of that same wetland approved herbicide. And the idea with the Phragmites, again, you do this initial mow, you bring down the height and the volume of this vegetation, you let it grow. When you cut it, it's weakened, it grows again, then you do the foliar application to this weakened and much lower plant. So our goal really is to do as little foliar application as possible. We would need to follow up the work on the Phragmites with foliar applications, though, every year. Again, it's just the nature of how Phragmites works. However, it should be a significantly less amount of herbicide used each year, and it would be the same process. We would really need to do it probably for about 5 years, and so would apply for that extension toward the end of year 3 to make sure we finish what we started. Yeah, so that's in a nutshell. Again, our whole goal is really to encourage native vegetation that supports both our rare and common wildlife. Herbicide is really the only way to be effective on an invasive, coverage of this size. But we're doing our very best to really limit how much we're just sort of spraying into the air by doing a lot of this cut stump treatment and then reducing the vegetation. So we're spraying more, discrete areas. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Linda. Eduardo, staff's recommendations and comments would be appreciated.
To answer Linda's question, I think it was about the mowing, I believe. At least on my end, I don't know about Mark. We haven't gotten any notification or anything to do with that. And then I suppose another quick question I had about the project. Is there a time period in where you need to apply the pesticide after you cut the stumps for it to be more effective?
Yes, absolutely. So in a perfect world, we would be right behind mosquito control, with our dabbers, because the plants do seal over within, practically a 1 hour time period. So we would be coming through and doing fresh cuts. Really, it would just be, slicing off the top, inch or loppering off the top inch of the cut stump.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. So as Linda mentioned, the area does fall within both estimated habitats, and they got back to us and said there was no adverse effects for the estimated habitat, and the proposed work is exempt for the priority habitat under MESA. So given that, we're recommending a standard order of conditions in accordance with the plan submitted on February 25th, 2025, and the project narrative dated February 26th, 2025.
All right. Does any commissioner have any questions? Is there anyone in the audience that wants to speak on this application? I don't see any. So at this juncture, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. We have a second. We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, I'll entertain now a motion to issue a standard order of conditions on the plan filed dated February 25, 2025, along with the narrative filed dated February 26, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
We have a second motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. Linda, good luck.
Great, thank you very much. Good night.
You're welcome. Good night.
Good night.
We're now concluded our public hearings. We're going for the items for discussion. We don't have any bills. There was no items for discussion, no enforcement issues, no other items reasonably anticipated. So with that, I will make one comment because I know the hour is late. We are continuing our efforts to find out whether or not the Commonwealth will extend the hybrid remote option. And frankly, the extension would have to be at this point, not an extension, but rather to create by law the option to do that. It wouldn't be as a result of COVID-19 anymore. And there are competing bills presently being considered by the Great and General Court. There's a House bill, a Senate bill, and I believe there's also an add-on to the budget that Governor Healy wants to sign, which is, by the way, how she got the first extension through. I guess they were so busy with the numbers, they didn't realize what else they were signing. That gives you great pause for concern, doesn't it? It should. But anyway, as soon as we know something, we'll let you know. Otherwise, all I can say is next meeting is the last we can do from a remote hybrid unless there's a change in the law.
Mike, may I be heard? I was
You
up
can
in
always be
Boston.
heard, Richard.
I was up in Boston the other day and I was on the Hill, and I believe it's going to be favorable and we should hear within 30 to 45 days, allowing it. That's what
Well, if it's 30 to 45 days, that's good news for actually later on, but that means we'll have to go back in person for about half a month to a month. So 1 to 2 meetings are going to have to be in person because unless they do something before then, we don't have the authority to conduct a lawful meeting remotely. So that being said, and there's a lot of logistics with going back to in person. And I know for some folks, it may even mean their attendance won't be as easy as it is now. That's for sure. But we also have logistics to concern ourselves with because the place we meet cannot be where we used to meet. We have to meet in one of the rooms that is accessible by TV. And at Town Hall, there's only 2. There's the select board meeting room and there's the planning board meeting room. And we have to check on availability and everything else. Happy days. So at this juncture, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Richard?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Meeting is adjourned. Hey, thanks you, everybody. We really stayed later than I would have liked.